Hello, my geeky friends, and welcome once again to a fresh take. I am your host, Dan Freeman, at the Danny Fresh on TikTok and Twitters. We got a fun one. We're going to talk Moon Knight. Did you guys see that first episode? It was a doozy, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. We got a great guest. Ed Bowser's joining us. But before we get into Moon Knight, a couple quick things. First of all, thanks for joining us back after we took a little 2-week break. Kind of got to shake some things up, make some adjustments. I'm not going to go too much into the details here, but I think moving forward, we're going to be looking at fewer longer shows, still doing them so we can go in depth on bigger topics, and more frequent, shorter pieces to give you guys kind of more content from different angles. So I think that's going to help kind of richen the content we've got coming out for you. Our next show, Monday, is a big one. We are going to be getting into Brandon Sanderson's massive fantasy epic, The Stormlight Archive. We've got, and we're going to be looking at sort of flawed heroes that try to save the world is essentially what goes on in that story, and really looking at trauma and mental illness in the hero's journey and in fantasy writing. And we've got some super fans of the Stormlight Archive. We've got some fantasy and sci-fi writers, a book podcast hosts that are going to be coming on, as well as social workers joining us. So we're really going to dive in from a lot of angles, and it's going to be really interesting, fun, and thoughtful. And if it sounds heavy, I promise we're going to keep it actually pretty fun and rolling. One other thing I did want to talk about, I posted on this on about this on TikTok earlier today. And again, if you're not following me on TikTok, at the Danny Fresh, and it got a pretty interesting response from the collecting community. So I wanted to talk about it real brief here, which is advocating for collecting what are, often maligned, I think, in the comic collectors world, which are those reader grade or beater grade comics, and specifically some older key comics where, some of these blue chip Silver Age books have hit such astronomical numbers that most of us can't afford to put them in our collection, and they're not making more of them, right? So I wanted to advocate for picking up, this book. That's Spider-Man 2041, First Scorpion, First Rhino. These are probably maybe 2.5, 3.5, maybe 4.0 grades. But they present really lovely, and at least for me, they allow me to build out my Silver Age Spider-Man run, which, again, they're not making more of them. So from an investment standpoint, I think they're a good investment too, because as the higher grades go up and up and up and up, these are going to be more sought after. But more importantly, just as a collector who loves them, you don't have to kind of miss out on the party. And the best part is, because of the condition, you can actually read them. That's why they're called reader grade. You don't have to worry about, your fingerprint possibly taking thousands of dollars of worth off a book. You can look at them with your friends or your kids or whatever, and not be in fear of that. So a great way to fill out your collection. So much more affordable. So just an endorsement for filling your collection out with reader grade copies. So happy to talk about that more. Hit me up if you want to dive into that topic deeper. But that's all the preamble I want to do, because I really want to get into this episode, which I enjoyed immensely. Moon Knight, episode 1. So let's bring in our guest. As I've said, the sharpest dressed man in the comic book community, Ed Bowser, joined the party here. How you doing, Ed?
What up, Dan? Guess who's back? Back again.
That's right. Tell us where folks can find you if they want other content from you.
Definitely. Well, let me take a deep breath, because it's a lot. So soulandstereo.com, if you're into music, if you're into pop culture, the stuff we'll be talking about today, that is your spot, soulandstereo.com. You can find us on YouTube as well. You can find us on Facebook. Yes, Facebook, the cool kind, not the stressed out kind. The Soul and Stereo Cypher Facebook group. Just a bunch of fans just like you and me, just hanging out, doing the thing. Then if you want to follow my personal accounts, E.T. Bowser on Twitter, Edward Bowser on Instagram, and then Edward Bowser on everything else. happy to chat with my peoples.
Right on. Well, thank you again for joining us. We always appreciate your time and your insight. You are a big Moon Knight fan, correct, sir?
Yes, a big fan from years and years ago. And I don't even remember. I was trying to rack my brain before we got started where my fandom started. I think I just was like, who? I love this costume. Who is this guy? And I've been following him for probably a decade and a half now.
Right on. And so with that in mind, did the show meet your expectations? What was your overall impression? Give me your broad strokes and then we'll get into the specifics, but
Certainly.
enjoy yourself.
I loved it. And I will say I went into this very skeptically because I know that this character is not familiar to most folks. Even most comic fans might know him from a video game, but they aren't really familiar with the character. And he's been retconned and kind of tossed around so much. And when you're trying to incorporate, as we heard, they were going to try to incorporate the mental health issue. I was like, that could get really sticky. There was just a lot of balls in the air. And I thought they pulled it off. First episode, I was very pleased.
Yeah, I agree. I think I fall into category my relationship to the character, which we'll get into a little bit more later. But I'm aware of Moon Knight. I kind of know the backstory, but I never was like deep on Moon Knight.
Yeah.
So I kind of probably in the middle ground with it as a character, but have always loved the sort of unique niche he fits in the Marvel universe, and also sort of the section of Marvel he tends to exist in is one that we haven't seen represented a lot in the MCU up until now, and then certainly as the casting was announced and you had such A-listers with Ethan Hawke and obviously Oscar Isaac, that got me even more interested. So I would say broadly, in relationship to the Disney Plus shows right now, I'm a little skeptical. Not that I haven't enjoyed them, I have, but I feel like they've been struggling to really find their tone. And at least with this first one, I think I have a lot to say about the tone, but I think they really nailed something important for them. But as like an episode of TV, I found it so enjoyable. I was just engaged from start to finish. And I watched it with my parents were in town. And my kids were with us. So I had 75-year-olds and 9-year-olds and everybody in between watching it. And literally all of us enjoyed it. So I think that's really saying something.
Great. I mean, my wife, she watched it as well. She liked it. She was a little stressed out by the stress that the main character was going through, which of course is intentional. She was very attached to him. And I'm like, just buckle up because this journey is going to keep going.
For sure. So, what did you mind? We got very little Moon Knight actually in this episode. Did you mind that at all? Did you find that effective? We got a lot of Steven, and a little Mark, and even less Moon Knight. How'd you feel about that?
And I thought that was a brilliant way to go because I have seen some folks say like they were disappointed. They wanted more Moon Knight because they want to see what this Moon Knight guy is about, and they feel like they didn't get enough of that. Patience, y'all, is coming. Trust me. I think that what they did was do a great job of establishing the character, establishing Steven, showing that, I mean, not only is he confused, he's terrified. He put the audience right through his eyes to be as confused and freaked out and uneasy as he did. They did a great job of that. We'll get to the actual superhero-ness, and there were touches of that here and there. But right now, I feel like this was just laying the groundwork because, again, this is a very different character. He's not just white palette swap Batman like many people have portrayed him to be. So there's a lot of groundwork to be laid. There's a lot to come. If they go where I think they're going, it's a lot of ground to be laid. So baby steps, and I like that.
And so talk to us a little bit about the character. Not, you don't have to, well, as much history as you want to go, but what is it about Moon Knight that appeals to you as a comic reader, and then you think they brought well?
Well, the thing that appealed to me the most, and it's, as we've talked about earlier, this character has been retconned and thrown around so much that it's hard to narrow down a kind of like distinctive story. The early one I remember was Mark Spector's 3 personas. And it wasn't a mental thing. My Batman fans know that sometimes Batman has to with the Joe Chill persona or whatever it is that he does when he's out in the streets and kind of doing this thing there. So you had Mark, you had Steven, and you had, I'm blanking on, lose my comic cred, I'm forgetting the third name, but he was a billionaire, he was a mercenary,
Right.
he was a cab driver,
Right.
and then he was Moon Knight. So he was all of these things, but that had kind of been changed. And a thing that really drew me in was the mental aspect. Here was a guy with different personalities. There are some stories where it's like they're not even sure if Khonshu is real. Maybe he made this up in his head. He's got this other persona, Mr. Knight. It's the detective, and he's just trying to figure out who he is, but also on this path of fighting for vengeance, fighting for in the name of a god that he's not really sure is on his side or if he's real. It was just all really intriguing because there's so many concepts that we're used to of the bad things happen to this guy. He puts on a mask, he goes fight people. And this is different aspects of that. That's what really drew me in.
Yeah, I do think it's one of the challenges, and I want to see. I still think they've laid enough ambiguity that they can go in different directions. I'd be curious to see how they go. But it is definitely one of those characters where, depending on who is writing Moon Knight, the Moon Knight power levels, the Moon Knight backstory shifted a fair amount. But what I like about this, and I really loved about the show as a whole, is they chose a tone confidently. And to me, that was the most promising aspect of it, right? That I feel like this was even Loki, which I know everyone disagrees a little bit, but like I would say consensus is Loki's been the high watermark for the Disney Plus shows. We can mess with that ranking, but I think most people think that. Even Loki, I think, was still in its very early episodes, like trying to figure out how confidently it could pull off some stuff. This felt such a confident first foot forward in what they were trying to execute. And I think and what for Marvel and Disney Plus is a really critical question, which is how do they bridge to some of the 70s horror characters that they want to get into? How do you bridge to the Wolverine series and the Deadpool series where you get, I'm sure there are some fans that are going to complain that it wasn't like R enough, right?
Right.
But it's going to be what it's going to be, right? Like, I feel like I walked away there going, okay, Marvel and Disney know and have a firm grasp on how they're going to give us this kind of material. And I'm cool with it. Like, it worked for me, and it may not work for everybody, but I thought they did a great job threading that needle and did it confidently.
Agreed. And that's one reason you mentioned Loki. I know I'm in the minority. I liked Loki. I like all the Disney Plus series, but I think that in my eyes, it's a little overrated, and it's for the exact reason that you said. I feel like the early episodes, they were like trying to do something, and they were trying to get the humor, and it was like it took them until the last couple that they actually figured out, okay, this is it.
I agree that show definitely like got stronger as it went.
Correct.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I mean, and it's early. We're talking about episode 1. Who knows what the future holds? But I feel like this start is one of the stronger starts they've had, because a lot of the series is kind of like, oh, there's these new characters. There's a girl and she's the Hawkeye, and it takes us a while to get connected to these characters. But there's so much intrigue, and the tone is so different that it's pulled in. They've done a great job.
And I thought, it's funny. This is the first Marvel series that will, in the Disney Plus, that will have introduced a character completely foreign to the audience, having no reference point. We've got a new characters, but they've fit in. And so actually that's kind of a higher bar. And I thought they did it so well, because even though there's still, I mean, if you don't read the comics, you're still plenty lost, but you don't mind the being lost, right? Like the unraveling and the mystery of figuring it out with Steven and figuring out what the heck's going on, I think is part of the appeal. And because they got that tone right, and because they did it so, I think, unapologetically, it gives you a sense of like, okay, I'm in good hands, and I think that's really important when you're trying to stretch your presentational boundary a little bit.
Correct. And it helps because you're going in, quote unquote, blind. Think back to WandaVision. I love WandaVision. I know people have issues with it. That
I liked
first
it more than
episode,
most.
it threw people for a loop, that first episode, because they went in thinking, okay, I know Wanda, I know Vision. I don't know them as well as some of these other MCU characters, but I know of them. And here it is. They're like, Leave It to Beaver, Bewitched, Dennis the Menace 1960s. What am I watching? So people were just like so thrown. This, you're thrown, but you're thrown with the character because the character doesn't know what's going on. You're along for the ride instead of being on the side, being like, what am I watching? Because they seem like they're having fun, but I don't know what's happening. This, I'm with Steven. Steven's confused. I'm confused. We're going to figure this out together, Steve.
Yeah, and I actually think you touched on something really important. So now we've talked about almost all the series that have been on Disney Plus, and this is zooming way back here, but what I think again, I really was struck with as a real like moment of clarity is again that confident tone. It's not just confidence in this show. It's WandaVision wanted to be more experimental, and it sort of promised to be, and it was. But then it felt a little short. Falcon Winter Soldier was the buddy film, and it felt a little short. And I think I can continue to do that all the way here.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm now able to do is reframe it a little bit, right? I'm now able to go, right, it's those genres within what is our MCU framework. So it's always going to feel a little bit less than. And maybe that will turn off some fans, right? I can understand that may not appeal to everyone, but it when you start being able to kind of process their shows through that language, through that lens, for me, I don't know, it becomes a more enjoyable experience, right? I'm tweaking my expectations. I'm not lowering them. I'm just kind of shifting them a little bit, right? So here's the MCU horror show, right? Or first, well, it's not going to be a horror film, right? It's the MCU horror, right? And you still had some scare moments. You still had great ambiance. You still had the storytelling, the visuals. You had all that, but it's not going to go all the way to this other thing. It's still that MCU thing, and I think that's so important as we are asking these questions of, okay, what does this MCU look like now that we have these big tentpole films and the Disney Plus shows? And now, and I know I'll clear the lane. I know you want to talk about this. It's no coincidence that our Netflix shows have arrived at Disney Plus about the same time this show showed up, right?
Just in time. And the reason why I feel so validated, Dan, is because I said from jump when we had, Jessica Jones and Daredevil and Iron Fist, I was like, the next one y'all got to do is Moon Knight because he fits the tone perfectly. So it is no surprise to me that we get those to kind of test the waters to be like, look, y'all, you're about to get some more. And it doesn't, of course, drift as far as those yet. It probably never will. We know it's Disney Plus. We know that you can flip over and see some Pixar movie just on the other screen. They're only going to go so far. However, I think they did a great job setting the table and setting the tone for this. I mean, this is as bloody as I've seen anything. So I think it worked. And having those series already kind of jump in there and say, this is a different side of the MCU. I love that it's going to be part of that. And I also love, this is kind of random, and I know it's still early, I love that this just felt detached, just like those shows felt detached. There was nobody wandering around saying, oh, man, sure sucked when I disappeared for 5 years with the blip. Like, no, like we're not doing that. I'm sure it'll happen.
It was I just realized something. You just said something so important. This is the first thing I can remember where nobody's talking about the blip.
No, nothing.
Thank goodness. And I was so happy to not have it. I did not realize it until you just said it. I was so happy finally to have some content that wasn't about some fallout from the snap or whatever.
People still aren't freaking out about Thanos. Like, I love it. It's great. I love that this story feels self-contained, completely different. And I'm sure it'll tie in eventually. I still want my Secret Wars where we all fight. But beyond that, I think that it's good to have this one little scary bubble with my boy Moon Knight.
Yeah. Alias, even after they added Daredevil Disney, I think what we're saying is it's kind of the most bloody of the Disney Plus original content, not of the
Yes, that's
stuff.
what I meant.
Certainly, the stuff from Netflix was essentially our stuff and went darker. Purple Man, terrifying. Daredevil, very
Yeah,
so
we didn't. I don't see Kate Bishop doing any of this stuff yet. Like,
right,
so, like that's what
right.
we meant. Yeah.
And so, but it has those violent moments, it has those darker moments, and yet we're still attacking would-be assailants with cupcakes, because right, like it's still Marvel, right? It's still an MCU.
MCU.
You see what I mean? And like that's what I mean by it helps clarify how they're going to navigate this question mark. And I think there is I'm sure, and I understand it, there's going to be people clamoring for even edgier, even darker, and valid if that's your taste. I understand. It's still Disney Plus. Like there's going to be some level, and I do think they are pushing it. One quick thing, I would agree with this. Producer Dan dropped it in. I agree that's still, that moment still stands out as an outlier moment. I was kind of shocked at that.
I was very shocked too. And then the image of the bloodstained shield, and like that was a pretty big deal. But
absolutely,
again, that was built up, and that was one thing. Whereas this, we saw like lots of brutality in one episode that I'm sure will climax later on.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought with that question. The brutality, the jokes. Oh, the other thing I thought was, and maybe this is a good way to, let's talk about this really incredible cast. The other thing is, it's interesting. They, MCU that's hit a lot for their banter, almost like they push it too far, but and Moon Knight actually, certainly in the later iterations, has a little bit of like Spider-Man wisecrack to him.
Oh, right? He does.
So I thought it was really interesting that actually a lot of the funniest parts of this were little throwaways by Steven. Like it's almost like they very thoughtfully got all the jokes in, but like threw him under, right? So like I was thinking about when his boss tells him, you're never gonna, if this is your audition for a tour guide, forget it. And he just stops for a minute and he's like, that's crushing, actually.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I thought it was hilarious. But it was like a little throwaway,
But it was done very well. The thing that, what's a good example? I love Shang-Chi. I love it. It's one of my favorites. He's one of the most underrated heroes of the new generation so far. But there were times where like it was very serious, and then some random character would just do something really goofy, and it like messed up the flow.
I think that's fair.
That didn't happen. Like just a normal wisecrack that you would make throughout your day, I think is okay, but not like the serious moment of tension. We're about to go do something, and then someone in the corner farts. Like that's too Simpsons.
Right.
This was a great way to do it.
And I think a testament to Oscar Isaac, right? I mean,
no question.
I think he's got the chops to pull that off.
That man is acting. No question. And I can't wait. I can't wait to see more of that, because when we saw Mark in the mirror, and Mark was nothing like Steven in my head, it was when I read these comics, I give them different voices, but distinctly different voices and tones and presentations, all from one man. Pretty amazing.
Yeah. Are you by any chance watching the show Severance on Apple TV?
I am not, and I need to be.
It's really excellent, and I think Kessler and I may do a separate show on Severance at some point here. Really one of my favorite shows of the year. And I'm sure this is total coincidence, because they probably were filming in very similar timelines, so there's no way it's like feeding off each other. But there's a very similar physical transformation of an actor who essentially has to play two versions of himself, and an effect of him snapping in and out of consciousness, much like Mark and Steven are snapping, that has a very similar visual effect. So it's just interesting that two shows kind of arrived on a very similar and very effective. I thought it was really cool, just the way he like would snap to and not be aware. I thought they did such an efficient job of storytelling with that.
It's yet another thing that, like, done another way, it could come off stupid or corny or just distracting. but
Mhm.
just the way like everything just flips, you're like sitting right there with him. I didn't know
Mhm.
Severance was doing that too. I really gotta check that show out.
Yeah, seven. Well, so the basic. This is not spoiler. The basic premise is that to work at this very exclusive corporation, that the work is so top secret that you have to commit to having this operation, so that while you're at work, you have no memory of your outside life, and when you're outside, you have no memory of your work life. So essentially, you kind of live two separate lives simultaneously. It's pretty high concept, and
That's
it's
crazy.
cool. Yeah, yeah. More on Severance later. But it is excellent. There's a lot of people in the chat are clearly watching it as well. Just checking my notes here. So and then Ethan Hawke was, I loved Ethan Hawke in this. I'm a fan anyway of Ethan Hawke.
Yeah.
But when you play the cult leader, an important part of the cult leader is you actually have to be like charismatic and appealing.
Yes.
Otherwise, it doesn't work. Then you're just like the super creepy guy. And there was still plenty menace and plenty creep. But actually, you kind of like were like, oh, I get why these people are following this guy. He seems to have a perspective that he believes in, and he thinks he's doing good. And I thought he was great. And that opening shot was so hard to watch with the crushed glass into the sandals.
It was so weird, but so Moon Knight.
Such a perfect tone setter, though.
Yes.
They are telling you in the first sequence, this is going to be a little heavier. This is going to be a little darker. This is going to be a little more uncomfortable. So if that's not you, check out now. And I thought that was part of what I mean. It was very confident.
I loved it. And you're right about the cult leader thing. One of my pet peeves, if I'm watching, especially older stuff, like stuff from the 90s and stuff, and they'll have the old Wizzle Rivel Up cult leader. I'm like, who would follow this guy? Like, he sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But like this guy, and I hate to say it, he almost had this caring demeanor about him. I mean, he was a creepy weirdo, but he was also very compassionate, maybe.
He wants a better world.
Yes.
He very genuinely believes he wants to build a better world, at least from what we've experienced.
I mean, he's going about it all kind of wrong, but yes,
right.
That's exactly what he wants. And if you are someone who is downtrodden, and I could see someone being actually allured to that, and that was a great job.
So are you what's the right word? How are you anticipating? Let's do a little. We're just going to do some guessing here, but how are you anticipating they kind of roll out, like the idea of Steven, of one personality kind of holding hostage and Mark, the Mark person? That's, I think, just a conceit of the show. I don't remember that, at least.
No,
from the comics,
that's
right?
new as far as I know. I have not seen that iteration.
So does that work for you? And where do you think that's heading, if you had to guess?
I think so. I think there are going to be like some weird stuff at play. First of all, we got Khonshu is like, I would say, the devil and the angel. He's like the devil over everything. But you've got Mark, I think, is going to get to the point where he's going to have to realize he's going to have to train this guy to like be better, because he can't do what he has to do, and poor Steven's fumbling around. So I think he's going to be almost mentor to himself. This is weird to say, but I think that might be where we're going, where he trying to help Steven get his stuff together. And then at the end, he teaches Mark to not be, if Mark is like in the comics when he's totally brutal, maybe he will teach Mark to not be so nuts. And then Khonshu's probably going to be pissed off because he's like, no, I want you to kill everybody. And then they will have their rivalry with the god. That's kind of what I'm seeing, but that's just educated guess.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's two things that I was left with that are question marks. One is, why is if this is really if we are to take everything at face value and there's no shift,
right?
Why is Steven necessary in this? Not for as a storytelling device, but I mean, like in Moon Knight's life, and like they're going to need to do some work to justify why having this Steven is important, right, in the process. Correct. So there has to be some kind of arc there that is relevant to the sort of survival of Moon Knight. The other thing I think is, I wonder, he asked that, the date that doesn't happen, right? With, by the way, I don't know who that tour guide is, and I maybe we're not going to see her again, but somebody cast her in something. She was both beautiful and I think excellent in like
Yes.
2 scenes. But
Yes.
she was fantastic. But you know, if he asked her on the date and he wasn't Steven, but if he asked her as Mark, he wouldn't have had his like British accent. He would have been so fundamentally different. I wonder if we're gonna get another, you know, like who is it that actually asked her out on that date? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that between that and the weird stuff with the phone, like I think there's a
Right.
lot of stuff that's still yet to be answered. And
Mhm.
again, I saw some people on Twitter hitting back and be like, "Well, this doesn't make sense," and blah blah blah. Let the story play out, y'all. It's coming. I trust them to do it, but that specifically was the one where I was like, "Why?" But I do think the answer's coming.
So another random thing I loved. I love that they let Noshu be like the asshole that he is. Like they let him. First of all, voiced by F. Murray Abraham, which I did not know if that was knowledge in advance, but what a brilliant piece of casting to get that man's voice. But that he's not like there. It's not a very clear-cut heroic element of the Moon Knight story, right? It's like he's not a nice whatever deity
No.
dude, whatever. So I love that he's calling him whatever he was calling him, the loser, the what did he call him, the idiot or whatever it was.
Yeah, he was like, "All the idiots back," or whatever he was calling them. But yeah, I will say, here's my one nitpick, and I know the tomatoes are gonna come. I don't know what it was, but something was giving me Venom Let There Be Carnage vibes.
You're not the only person I've heard say that.
And again, it's not enough for me to turn me off from the show, but there were a couple times where it's like, oh, Eddie, right. It's kind of like, all right, calm down, dude. So that was the only thing where I was like, but I didn't hate it.
I liked it. In all fairness, I have avoided the Venom films, so maybe I wasn't as traumatized in them.
I don't hate them. I was more mad about Carnage, but that's a rant for another day. They messed up my boy.
Well, I mean, you have another chance to see a great film. It sounds like in Mobius. It seems like that's a really good film.
You must not have read the reviews I read.
I'm not sure I've ever seen something get worse reviews.
Oh my god, they're destroying it.
Yeah, I'm not shocked. It looks pretty bad. I have a couple nitpick things for you. This is high level criticism. If I'm at a steak place and I order the best cut, okay, clearly I don't know what I'm talking about because I say, give me the best cut, and we know he's a vegan and everything like that. And then the waiter asks me how I want it cooked, and I say good or whatever.
Yeah.
There's no waiter worth their anything at a steakhouse who's going to translate that into, okay, I'll have it well done. You're not getting a well done steak at a steakhouse on the best cut of meat.
If you say that, now listen, I will say that I'm usually a well type of dude, but if you make that comment like he made it, there's no way that it would take nice to well. That's not
right. Well, I'm just saying,
that's
I'm saying like this. You may like it that way, but I'm just saying at the steakhouse, if you ask them how do they run a steak, they're going to tell you depending on the cut, medium, medium rare, maybe medium well. That's going to be the default setting. So that's just a nitpick on my part.
But you're right. They're not going to say, oh well, like. Usually when I have to fight with people,
correct.
At there. All right,
wait,
Alex.
Are you saying you canceled Moon Knight at that comment? You canceled me? You canceled Ed? Who just got canceled?
I think Alex canceling me, but it's so cool. It's still love. It's still love. But
no, took you out of it. I agree, Ali. I totally agree. Anyway. Oh god. We can say something? Or maybe not.
No.
Okay. Did Oscar Isaac's accent drive you crazy?
No, like I saw so many people being like, "Oh, this accent is so awful." Maybe I just watch awful stuff. Like I was not bothered by the accent. I mean, clearly it was a bit put on, for lack of a better word, but no, it didn't bother me at all.
Yeah, it almost felt, you know how I criticized Batman and said, like, it's almost like they just cast everyone and told them to do the same bad accent.
Do the Batman voice.
Do the Batman voice and, like, a bad, like, New York cop thing. I kind of feel that way about the British accents in this show. Like, I almost felt like they were like, oh, no, Oscar Isaac can't do a good British accent. So let's just cast a bunch of other people that don't. And then they just all let them have bad British accents. And then it was fine.
They are quite abrasive.
They're
and
big. They're big accents.
They are unnecessarily big. I have lots of friends. Shout out to my crew from across the pond because I know they're watching now, and none of them sound anything like that. So no, that's very cartoony. But again, it didn't bother me.
Yeah. I got one more specific question, and then I'll just open floor if there's anything I'm missing that you wanted to hit.
Yeah.
What do we think of the mom, right? Of this person he calls, that Steven calls, that's his mom. We never hear him actually talk to her. And he leaves her these kind of long messages, and it kind of like, I forget what he says at the end. He's some kind of cute sign-off phrase, something, that you might say to a parent, a child, whatever. But we haven't heard her on the other end of the phone. Like, is she there? Do you think that's some kind of programming with him? Like, do you have a take on that?
I worry that because I've watched enough of these kind of shows that if mom is real, mom might not be there. Mom might be some weird deal in his head. I'm skeptical of mom because we never heard anything. I mean, who knows? Mom could walk in the door the next episode, but I'm a little skeptical of mom.
Yeah,
I said the same red flags went off.
Yeah, it feels a little like they gave us, because if it was just one call, I would have dismissed it. But that they did it twice tells me they're setting up something,
right? Yep.
And yeah, Marvel doesn't, and like, in all fairness, as much as I have liked the Marvel shows, I think this has been my favorite of the pilots so far. Generally speaking, most of the show's pilots I've enjoyed. It's how they've landed the plane that has been the issue.
Pretty much.
So I'm still holding out a little bit of a, let's see, let's see where we're going here.
Right. I mean, it's way too early to crown it king, but if we're talking about the first debut episodes, this is probably my favorite by far.
Yeah. I would need to go back and check Loki's again, just because I'm not totally sure I remember, but I think I agree with you.
Those first three Lokis, y'all. I mean,
I just don't remember, to be honest. I had a very strong, positive feeling about Loki. I don't have enough clarity of remembering that first one.
It's a great show.
But I know I watched this one and then I watched it again, like shortly after, and I'm not that guy. Like, I'm not a big rewatcher, and I was more than happy to it just genuinely was a joy to watch.
I have not had this excitement for a Marvel show since the first Daredevil. I remember where I was when I first watched that, because I was like ironing. I remember the ironing board, and I'm just like, oh my God, this show is so great. And I had that same feeling watching this.
Oh yeah, I will say I still I'm talking about this just in context to the Disney Plus shows, because I still think the Netflix shows were playing with a different standards.
No question.
So what anything else that I didn't hit or I didn't ask about in relationship to your thoughts on Moon Knight the character and sort of the context of the show? Or something you wanted to talk about?
The only thing that I want to mention, and again, this might just be for those who might be not familiar with the character, and pretty much their familiarity and I don't know if you've seen them, kind of like the meme Moon Knight culture that has kind of come up in recent months. That's all kind of Spider-Man-ishy, and it's like there's something with him and like vampires or something. So their perception of Moon Knight is almost, as you said, Spider-Man, this wacky, quote unquote, crazy guy, because that's how he was portrayed in early caricatures, where he's just like this unhinged wacko. But then we get this very dark, very serious, and some people were thrown by that. So again, I would just say that if that wasn't what you were expecting, just settle in. There's so much fertile ground here that I think that the MCU is doing a great job of reestablishing the character. So sit tight. This will be probably a little different than the memes, but I think
I mean, I will say that Moon Knight tends the image I have of him in the comics, because I've read so many different writers write him so differently, is actually a little bit of a mashup of, there is a little Spidey in the wisecracking. There's a lot of Frank Castle Punisher in the sort of like, not just the violence, but the sort of like the same way people talk about him being crazy. That's sort of like, it doesn't matter. It's it's about completing the mission and his body be sacrificed and whatever. And then of course there's the Batman references, though That's more about like the costume, I think, than the knight than other stuff.
It's the
Um,
costume in the night, and
then
one
the
of his
billionaire.
personas was rich, and he does
Yeah.
have like the moon themed gadgets, and like,
Yeah.
oh, I got crescent boomerang.
Yeah, but
And
that's like, but it's not like he's like a utility belt or whatever. There's actually a great show. There are plenty of DC and Marvel ripoffs of each other
Mhm.
that are more direct, and that actually might be a really fun episode to talk about. Black Cat and Catwoman and
Oh, it's a
Aquaman and
bunch of those.
Submariner and all that stuff. Darkseid and Thanos.
Mhm.
But this actually one doesn't hold up as much for me. Well, I for one am excited to see what's next. I am always going to hold a little bit of reservation until we see Marvel really landed all the way through the series. But I'm not sure I could have asked for much more other than better steak etiquette,
Yes,
maybe less cupcake fighting, and better accents. But outside of that, I don't have much to complain about.
I agree. I mean, I can only make one weird Venom reference, but other than that, I
Right on.
loved even down to the costume. And I forgot to mention this real quick because I am a
Oh
huge
yeah.
fan of his original costume. Why has no one ever thought to make this Egyptian themed hero have
Mhm.
a costume that looked like a mummy? I thought that was great. I
Oh
love
yeah.
that.
Do we have a photo? Let me see if I can put it in the chat. I don't know if Dan's here right now. We add this to the chat. Is it so you were a fan of how they did the costume?
Yes, I love like the bandage look, and
Mm-hmm.
I was always a big fan of the cowl and the cape and those set eyes and that darkness. But you can even see the detail on the arm there, just like that bandage stitching. It was very well done. Thought it was
Yeah,
dope.
it looked cool. I mean, it just like at the bottom line, it's not
Yeah,
not
there
being
it
super
is.
complex about it, but like it looked cool, and that's part of the Moon Knight thing. Yeah, it's a good look. All right. Well, we will continue to check in as the series goes. Maybe a couple more. Maybe we'll do like a midway point and then an end of series
Yeah.
review. If you're still watching, college basketball fans, I might have a secret little short bonus show for you tomorrow with talking about Duke UNC. And Monday, the big Stormlight Archive show. Thanks so much, Ed. Thanks everybody watching, and we will see you next time.
We'll see you.